Hi, guys. Welcome to KRTD Chat. I'm your host, Reef Breland. We're here with senatorial hopeful coming from Arkansas, Dan Whitfield. How are you, Dan?
I'm good, Reef. Thank you so much for having me and giving me the opportunity to answer your questions this evening.
Yeah, absolutely. So, tell us a little bit about yourself. What's the most important thing you think Arkansans should know about you?
Sure. Well, I would say the most important thing about me is that I'm not a politician. I'm just a regular working class guy that's tired of the status quo. I'm tired of seeing our politicians get bought and paid for by special interests. And in return, they basically sold our government to those special interests and they don't represent us anymore. So I really want to be a actual delegate representative that listens to my constituents and helps extend their voice in the legislative process.
Absolutely. I mean, sounds great. Um, the one fluff question I'll give you today: what's your favorite raid boss in WoW? I saw your bio said you played a bunch of WoW. And do you have a favorite? Can you pick one?
Oh man, that was so long ago. Let's see here. I mean, I played way back in the day when Naxxramas 40 was like the main raid that everybody
Raid.
did. And there was a
Yep,
boss in there where it was like Dance Dance Revolution, where
I
the
remember
boss
that one.
would do an ability and you would have to move from stage to stage to stage. And if so
Right.
many people couldn't do it properly, then you would just have to wipe and start all over. And he was pretty tough. I wish I knew his name, but that would be my favorite World of Warcraft boss.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many good ones. Molten Core was great.
Oh
That
yeah.
whole raid. But I saw in your bio that you worked on the oil rigs as an engineer, right? Was that it?
I worked for an instrumentation company as a technician where
Gotcha.
what I did was I would go onto oil rigs, offshore rigs, barge, land,
Right.
and I would install their computer systems. I would install safety
Gotcha.
sensors, run all of the wires, and then manage those systems.
So my father works in the towboating industry. I'm sure you had a bunch of them take you
Uh-huh.
out to places. But he was a captain, and he tells me this story. He was working the oil rigs before they had radar on every boat, right? And you know how it is, shutout fog in the middle of oil rig country. You're running off charts and that sinking feeling in your gut that you don't want to hit anything.
Hmm.
And he hears a mayday call through his radio, and he goes and picks it up. And there was this politician on his fishing yacht who got stuck out there. And so here's my father in shutout fog, maybe 20-30 feet of viz, right? And he gets this politician back to the mainland. And suddenly this politician is really invested in having radar in every vessel, right?
Right.
And it just brought me to the question of how does your working class past influence your view of the future of this country?
And that's a really good question because I think that's something that a lot of politicians actually lack is they lack the ability to understand what it is like to be part of the working class, a lot of the struggles that the working class have to go through. And I've had such a diverse work history and a diverse I've lived in so many different places from California to Nevada to Louisiana,
Right.
Arkansas, Wyoming for a short time. I've been kind of all over the place. So I've seen how different groups of people live and
Yeah.
I've been able to, as a cable guy, go into their houses, talk to them, and listen to the different kinds of struggles that they have in different areas. So I think I have a unique perspective on being able to relate with a lot of people, a large group of people, rather than just being, brought up in a little bubble, given the silver spoon, sent
Boom.
off to an Ivy League school. Uh, all the kind of BS that we usually see with politicians who try to be representatives who don't know how to represent a people that they can't understand.
Right.
So I think, I mean, I was a Domino's delivery driver for 5 years. So I understand what it's like to work for less than minimum wage on a tip job where you could work 40 hours a week delivering pizzas, get a $300 paycheck. Uh, because you had earned $800, but then they took all your tip taxes out and all these different things.
Right.
So I can understand why we need to say eliminate tip taxes, why we need to make sure that even waiters and waitresses aren't making $2 an hour, but making at least minimum wage. Working in the oil field, I saw a lot of environmental problems. I mean, I'm ashamed to say at the time I was young, I didn't know, but I've been on rigs where they've had spills and they
Yep.
decided not to call the correct
Coast Guard.
authorities to
Yep.
inform them because it would cost too much money.
Money.
And I've been able to see these different things, which I think will help me better understand how legislation I'm voting on is going to reflect and impact different people's lives.
Right. And a lot of times it also costs you your job, especially if you have any ties to what's going on, if that spill happens, stuff like that. But I wanted to ask, you're running against Tom Cotton or Bozeman
I actually
specifically?
ran against Senator Tom Cotton last year as
Right.
an independent, and I was unable to get on the ballot because independents had a severely burdensome way to get on the ballot. We had
Especially
to
with
collect
COVID and stuff, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. I actually had
Yeah.
to collect 10,000 verified signatures between February 1st and May the 1st of 2020. When
Yeah.
our governor declared a state of emergency on March 13th, that took away about 60% of my time, and I wasn't able to get on the ballot. We had,
Right.
long story short, we had sued to get ballot access, and the Attorney General's office was representing the Secretary of State, John Thurston, and they were able to delay our case past the election. And we actually just had our case heard back on March 18th, like
Right.
several months after the election. So unfortunately, Tom Cotton did secure another 6 years without having a Democratic opponent. And I am going to be running against Senator John Bozeman as a Democrat for this upcoming election cycle so that hopefully we can make sure we do get one of these GOP senators out of our representation, representing our state here in Arkansas.
Just to move opponent focus, have you heard any plans of the Democrats trying to primary you or
At this
uh
point, I have not actually. I think it would honestly be in, I guess, the GOP's best interest if the Democratic Party did decide to primary me, because we have a problem here in Arkansas of having not enough participation in elections, where we had
right,
66 Republicans run unopposed. And this upcoming election is going to be extremely important here in Arkansas. We can't afford to be having Democrats running against each other, wasting good candidates so that, say, if someone primaries me, that's one less person to run for, say, governor, lieutenant governor, or secretary of state, attorney general, um, treasurer, commissioner of the land, not including all of the different seats for that. We have 4 House districts and all the different state seats. We have so many different seats. And when you have 66 Republicans run unopposed in an election cycle, you have to make sure you have every candidate possible for the next. So
yeah,
I hope they don't decide to primary me, because if they do, that's someone who could be running for one of these spots who will end up, the GOP will end up having a candidate run unopposed instead. But
right,
if they do, I'm ready for the primary. I'm a very progressive Democrat. I was a registered Republican for most of my life until I switched independent, and I'm a new Democrat. And I hope that I will be able to show the Democratic voters for the primary that I have a really good chance of beating John Bozeman, better than what, say, an establishment Democrat may have.
right,
So it's really in everyone's best interest for me to run for Senate, to have a good person run for governor, and at least a really good person run for lieutenant governor, because even lieutenant governor is going to have a gentleman named Jason Rappert will be running
okay,
for that. And he's a very, very far right religious extremist person who we really can't afford for him to run unopposed.
yeah. Um, I wanted to to win your election, you will probably have to amass a pretty big grassroots movement. Um, I just wanted to know how you plan on using that movement to implement whatever policy plans you may have in the Senate, and how you plan on creating that movement in the first place.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a really good question. It's a good point. And one of the benefits of starting my campaign as an independent against Tom Cotton with having no Democratic opponent, I was
Right.
able to build a really good network of volunteers. We already have 85 volunteers just standing by. I had my first COVID vaccination shot on, I believe it was the 23rd of last month, and I'll be getting my second one on the 15th of April. And
Yep.
then May 1st, I'll be safe. And that's really when I'm going to start hitting it hard, going to meet and greets, starting events, starting fundraising events. I'm going to have like
Right.
fundraising fishing tournaments all over the state. It'll be really fun. I'm excited. But we already have 85 volunteers standing by. So we've got the manpower. We have people that are specialized in different things, from management with human resources to website development, graphics development. I have people who have been on multiple campaigns, who have done a lot of phone banking, door knocking, canvassing. So we're ready. We just
Right.
need my vaccine to make me safe so that I can go out there and keep people around me safe as well.
Right. And I know you talked about one of the policies in your on your website is that you want more direct democracy through through your tech background, right? You want to make
Mhm.
websites and stuff that allow people to directly vote on policies that you want to uh, put in place. Um, but I wanted to, one of the questions politicians when running get asked a lot is how they're going to make friends in the Senate when they're right. And me personally as a voter, I'm more interested in how you're going to make enemies,
Mhm.
right? How who do you feel like the biggest enemies to policies you would have be in the Senate?
Well, I guess ideological groups are going to be my biggest enemy, because I'm really going to be by the people for the people.
Right.
And I'm not going to be taking any kind of special interest money towards like taking money from pro life groups and then voting on pro life legislation,
Inflation.
taking money from groups like the NRA and then voting against common sense gun
Late. Right.
regulations and things like
Yeah.
that. And that's a really good question, because that kind of actually ties into the previous question you had asked, where
Yeah.
how am I going to implement these policies? But that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to have a direct democracy platform where I can actually ask Arkansans, what kind of policies would benefit your families? What do you think a good policy is? Give people
Right.
a platform to be able to vote on those different policies. And then I will actually submit 12 bills per year created by Arkansans, which
Yeah.
is actually giving them a direct voice in the legislative process. And I'm really surprised that's not done more often. And
Right.
I think it's a really good way to help people feel like I'm listening, to help people feel like if they get me into the Senate and they elect me to represent them, that I will actually represent them.
Right. And I think, I look at the political stage like, a really extra convoluted reality show at times. And I personally feel like reality show stunts like making a big media presence for yourself and having that backing of people would really help you um push for actual policies and to drag, establishment senators kicking and screaming to policies the American people want.
Yeah.
um, are you worried about how much that establishment will spend to beat you? Right.
Well,
I want to know how you're going to combat that monetary influence and how you plan on highlighting the difference between you and your opponent in regards to that, who you're fighting for in that sense.
so it's going to take a lot of groundwork. A lot of campaigns and candidates, they need to raise millions and millions and millions of dollars so that they can advertise, so they can put
Right.
a candidate's face and phone number and website and all that on every different billboard around the state, so that people will actually see them through multimedia and things like that, rather than the candidate actually having to go out and talk to people. So I'm going to be spending a lot less money, because my money will be spent, rather than on advertising, on actually traveling and talking to big groups of people.
Right.
And that's going to give me an edge. And I think that it's a really good way to campaign, because it doesn't only save a lot of money for the campaign, but it helps me build relationships with my constituents, to listen to what their concerns are throughout my whole campaign process. That way, once I do get into office, I'll already have a very long list of different things that can help my constituents, things that my constituents actually want me to be doing.
Right. It reminds me of the two biggest political, stunts in my historical brain. The fireside chats, right?
Mhm.
That got the American public interested in what was going on with the country, right? As well as, I think it was that same person who had railroad campaigns, right? Would go on the back of a railroad, on a train and talk to people from the back of that train, right? Just get
Yeah.
you know but
And we started to see that a little bit more recently as well. Back in 2016, when we had Dr. Jill Stein running for
right,
president under the Green Party, she started doing fireside chats every single week.
every single
Uh,
week,
yeah, talking to people, asking them questions, answering questions. And I thought
right,
that that was a really cool way to interact with I guess, her constituency as a whole. So
Yeah.
that's why I actually decided to start doing my weekly live stream update Q&As, where every single Saturday night at 6 p.m. Central, I go online, I answer questions, I tell people about what's happened the last week, what's happening the upcoming week, and
Right.
I try to be as involved as possible. And I've actually even recently started the last couple weeks of Friday nights at 8 p.m. Central. I'm doing an Arkansas legislative recap session where
Okay.
I go over all of the different bills that our state legislators have been working on and passing, and then breaking it down and going into each bill, pulling up my side screen and going through the bills and reading what's good about them, what's bad about them. And I think that things like
Right.
that will really help bring the public more interest into helping get people elected so that we can start to pass legislation that we approve of, because we're not doing very well down here in Arkansas right now.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've already seen we have anti-trans legislation going through. We have anti-child legislation going through. We've banned abortions. I mean, it's just amazing the amount of partisanship legislation that's being passed in Arkansas. And
Right.
House Bill 1570 was called the SAFE Act and would actually prevent doctors from helping children transition into whatever sexual orientate or sexual
Yep.
identity that they decide to choose, whatever feels best for them.
Right.
And I couldn't believe that our state legislators had passed something like that.
It's like
Unfortunately,
the bathroom legislations and stuff like that, all those kind of things, right?
yeah,
I
but
wanted
our governor vetoed it today, which is important for me to say. I was really proud that
right.
he was able to come in and veto that bill.
I want to come back to have you seen the recent news of AOC giving donation dollars to particular centrist candidates who oppose the policy she supposedly supports, right?
Yeah.
I know you have policy stances on fundraising transparency, but I wanted to know how you specifically plan on keeping your fundraising transparent while running and during your term, right?
So one thing that's going to be different about me than other politicians, um, I'm not going to run for reelection. So,
Okay.
number one, a lot of politicians, that's when you had asked earlier, are you worried about the enemies you'll make kind of thing? Well, I'm
Right.
not too worried, because what does an enemy do? They just give your opponent a bunch of money in
Money.
your next campaign.
Right.
And I won't have to worry about that. I don't have to worry about wasting time asking people for money, wasting their money on advertising. I don't have to worry about any of those special interests trying to give me money and owing them favors later. I
Right.
will win this one election. And after this election, if I'm doing a good job, my name will be on the ballot and you can vote for me. And if I'm
Yeah.
not doing a good job, then I shouldn't have to spend a bunch of money to try to convince you that I am. So I'll only be having one election campaign, and then my name will be on the ballot after that. But I won't be actually running a campaign per se.
And I
So,
take it you won't be paying your dues to the Democratic Party while you're there, right? To
well,
fill their war chest further.
I've paid like my party dues and things like that, membership
Right.
fees. But as far as giving the Democratic Party money,
Yeah.
I don't think that's something that candidates really do for the most part. And after I'm elected, I don't plan on giving the Democratic Party money. But if I see a candidate in my home state who is supporting progressive values like Medicare for all, Green New Deal, eliminating student debt, federally decriminalizing cannabis, all these different things,
Right.
then of course I would make the maximum individual contribution to that person.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you would do that whether they're independent or whatever, right? That
Yeah,
you know,
I'm 100% policy above party.
right. Yep. I want to going back to that. Politicians right now spend quite a bit of their time in call centers, right? I think it's the average was like 4 hours a day, right, in call centers calling their donors, right? And if you don't do that, how do you plan on using that time to make sure your constituents, the people who actually support you, understand what's going on in the Senate and what you're doing for them?
Well, I'm going to be really short on time because I have a lot of things that I want to do. I have a list of policies, pages long.
Right.
I'm going to keep busy. I'm going to be keep meeting with educated people on specific issues. That way I can make sure that the bills I'm submitting are good for everybody and not just a few. I'm
Right.
going to be also, I've pledged to do 12 town halls per year here in my state. So that takes a lot of time. So rather than sitting in a call center asking for people for money so I can stay in office and keep getting my salary, I'll be spending that time instead talking to Arkansans here in their homes and listening to their concerns and asking them what I can do to alleviate their stresses and their financial burdens and social issues.
Right. Um, I for one think that the whole act of making laws right now is not a very transparent system. Is there any way that you can make the process that might be happen behind closed doors more public? Are you opposed to senators and representatives being forced to wear body cameras during working hours?
I think that's great. Actually, if you just Google Arkansas LEG, Arkansas Ledge, then you
Right.
can see how Arkansas has a Arkansas legislative website where you can actually go on and you can watch live every single different hearing and committee meeting that's happening. And I think that's
Right.
something we really should have at the federal level where people can see what's going on at all times. I know C-SPAN tries to do it as much as
Do it.
possible. But
Yeah.
that's why I'm also going to continue doing my weekly live stream and updating Q&As after I get elected. That way I can talk about what we did in the
Right.
Senate this last week, what we have planned for the next week. I'm trying to make sure that everyone is as up to date as possible with what's actually happening currently in the
Right.
Senate, because there's a
Um,
lot of behind closed door stuff going on that
yeah.
people don't know about.
Would you be opposed to yourself wearing one when going into committee meetings and
No,
stuff
not
like
at
that?
all. I'd
Right.
be honored.
Yeah.
I would be the tool of the people. I couldn't be more
Right.
honored to do that.
See, I'm wondering if there's rules that would say that you can't do that now, because to
Well,
me that
I'm
would be
sure there's
a,
classified issues. Whenever they're
of
talking
course.
about sensitive information, you
Yeah.
would probably have to turn it off.
Right.
But other than that, I mean, it's a public space. These people work
Space.
for us.
Well, I'll order you that camera, and you can definitely wear it when you go into those rooms. But a cursory glance at your website reveals a policy tab where you have long form explanations of most of the policies you have, police reform, Medicare for all, renters' rights, which I know is a big deal in Arkansas. Um, which three of these policies do you think you would be most successful in enacting? And do you have a game plan for enacting those when you get there?
Yeah, I do actually. And I get that all the time. A lot of people who try to advise me will be like, there's too many things on your policy page. Break it down, pick three of them, focus on those three,
Right.
and that's what's going to get you elected. I'm like, man, there are way more than three problems going on in
Of
our
course.
country right now.
Yeah.
And when I heard Bernie Sanders say in an interview, he said that's an old way of thinking. We don't think that way anymore. We have to move
Right.
forward. I really decided to adopt that strategy and that feeling. And I'm going to keep my long policy tabs. We have so many
Right.
problems that we need to address them all. So let me hop over real quick to my website.
Right.
And all right.
Which
So
what's
of
the URL
course,
on that for everyone
sure.
to get?
It's danforarkansas.com. And I think you should be able to see it
Perfect.
actually here. Let me go ahead and move this up here because it doesn't show up very well on Zoom down there.
And you
There we
have
go.
your all your social media on there and everything too, right?
Yeah, I've got everything at danforarkansas.com. You can see all my different social media links. You can see the
Perfect.
contact page where it actually has my phone number, my email. You can send me a text message, give me a call, send me a direct message on any platform, and I'll always respond personally.
Great.
Now, as far as different policies that are really important to me that we need to get passed immediately would be number one, Medicare for all. That is the most important because not only is that going to save lives, it's going to save money, it's going to save people money, it's going to save employers money, it's going to make jobs
Right.
that don't currently offer benefits have a bigger competitive advantage to be able to make sure their employees have those benefits.
And I think
So
even 60% of Republicans support that measure. When
yeah, I
Fox
think we've
News
got
poll.
over like 80% in total support now. And the
Yeah.
problem is there's a lot of misinformation out there still, especially the name is terrible. It's not Medicare.
Or
It shouldn't have been called Medicare for all. It should be called Healthcare for all or
for all.
something. You don't
Right.
have to worry about any kind of subsidies or extra plans or anything like that.
Yeah.
But what it will do briefly for Arkansas is our average household income here is $40,000 a year. So
Yep.
what Medicare for All is going to do, it's not free. We will have to pay for it. And if you currently qualify for Medicaid, you won't. So if you make less than $29,000 a year, then it will be free at no cost. Now, if you make more than that, we will pay for it. But here's what we will pay. It will be 4% of your income after 29,000. So what that means for Arkansas is it would be 40,000 minus 29, which is 11, and 4% of that is $400 per year to
Right.
cover the average Arkansan household, which is worlds cheaper than what so many working class
Pay
people are
for
currently paying.
insurance. And it would also take the burden off of small business, for because now they're forking out their hard-earned dollars to give their employers health care, as opposed to taking a lump sum off the top of our economic pile,
Mhm.
right? And filtering it down to the bottom where people can actually get the medical help that they need. And I know Sanders has asked this question a lot of how it's going to be paid for and things like that, right? And he'll usually say, well, median incomes might get a small increase. But I think, when 70% of our tax dollars go to the military budget, right? I think if we,
Mhm.
reduce that back to the height of the Iraq war, even, right, we would have plenty of money to spend on that. We have the highest GDP of any other country, and I think we can definitely afford something like that. Um,
We
and I
really
agree.
can. And even our employers, like for example, right now, my wife and I, we work for a company called JB Hunt. We have health insurance. I'll just say we have private health insurance, and
Right.
we pay about $860 a month for the two of us and our 8-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
$860 a month. Plus, we still have a $1,500 deductible. We still have to pay copays, and we still have to
Yeah.
pay for our prescriptions if we get them. Now, if you're, say, making $100,000 a year here in Arkansas or anywhere in the country, and you get Medicare for All, then it would be 100,000 minus 29 is 71, and 4% of 71,000 is about $238 a month. So
Right.
that would save our family and so many families that are in the same exact position as us 600 or give or take dollars a month. And at the
Right.
same time, just because we're paying 860 a month doesn't mean that's all that's being paid. Our employer is matching that. They're also
Yeah.
paying Blue Cross Blue Shield 860 a month. So when
Right.
our employer has to drop their costs as well, they're going to be saving money. We're going to be saving money. Everyone's going to be saving money. And you know what? If some pharmaceutical company that profits $100 billion a year while people die because they can't afford their prescriptions doesn't make $100 billion, they only make like $50 billion.
Right.
So be it.
I used to know a person who worked for the insurance company. His sole job for he worked for Blue Cross, where he calls up Hospital A and says that I'll give this much for an appendectomy. Can because of that, for this other procedure, can we make them pay a little more, right? It's
Mhm.
all a for-profit system in their heads of how can we constantly get money out of this situation, which hopefully, if we have a more single payer healthcare system, right, it'll allow the government to barter a little more efficiently, right? That
Oh yeah.
we'll be able to go, all right, every hospital in this area, right, this is what we're paying for this. And hopefully it will take the price gouging that the medical field has done for quite a long time, that hopefully makes those band-aids a little more to what you get them in the store, right?
Yeah.
um
And I
but
mean, medical debt is the number one cause of bankruptcy in America.
huge. Yeah,
And
huge.
70% of the people who file bankruptcy for medical debt have medical insurance. So we know
Right.
what the problem is. Now we have to solve that problem. And I think
Definitely.
Medicare for All is the solution.
I think one of the biggest problems for senators when they get to Washington is, I come from, I do a bunch of mixed martial arts and stuff like that, and I watch a lot of fight sports. And there's a classic thing of when a fighter gets too uh too much fame and money that he knows what to do with, right?
Mhm.
They sense that he loses some ability. They call it, he loses that hunger, right? That they ask literally, how is he hungry, right? How can he afford to eat? He can't, he's not struggling, right?
Hmm.
I want to know how you're going to avoid that Washington brain, how you're going to stay hungry and close to that working class roots that you have, right? That's my thing. I don't want you to get there and lose that somehow, right? And you continue to fight for the people that you want to fight for now.
I think that's a really important question, and that's why I support term limits.
Yeah,
And I'll have my one campaign where I get elected. My name will be on the ballot for the second election, and
right,
I won't be campaigning for that. But after that, if I win my second election, I'm not going to run for office again because I do believe in term limits, and I believe, exactly, you have to have that hunger. You have to be able to understand and empathize with the people that you're representing. Otherwise, you can't truly represent them. And after spending, 12 years in Congress, that's a long time away from being in the working class. And at that point, you really have to reach to try to understand how people are feeling because it's just been so long. And I
right,
think that having the background I come from, the reasons that I want to run for office, the reasons that I want to actually bring representation back into our legislative process, I think those things are going to keep me hungry. They're going to keep me wanting to focus on the right things, which are going to be making this country. I don't want to I hate that Donald Trump ruined Make America Great Again,
you're
but
right.
I want
Yeah,
to make this country great. I want to make sure that our children are proud to grow up in America, that they're patriotic like we were when we were young,
right,
and that we're giving them the best opportunities to pursue the American dream and to actually have so many of the different things that we were all promised as kids. If you work hard, you'll get these
right.
things. Well, I mean, unfortunately, for especially millennials and younger, you can work hard all you want. And unfortunately, as
Yep,
long as you're working for somebody else, you're never going to become wealthy or financially independent.
right,
You have to go off on a different track and start your own business, become an entrepreneur, and things like that. Whereas back in, say, the 50s and 60s, you could have a family of four. The father, or of course, if the mother wants to work, because times have changed a lot, but
right.
one person in the family could work full time,
Yeah,
support the family, be able to afford a house, not just get by paycheck to paycheck renting an apartment. And they could still go on vacations once a year. They could have a lot of happiness involved in their family, no financial stress or burdens. That's the way that we should be when we are the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We have
right.
this GDP, we have this money, but unfortunately, our money trickles up and it never comes back down.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I think the thing, when I'm a millennial, I don't know how I am, but I think I just snuck in there.
Uh
But
huh.
I think that, I look at when you look at that when that American dream was coined and built, and there was massive business regulation, and unions were the strongest they ever were, and we had this boom after the government has been flooding the market with war bonds, and pumping money into I mean everything,
Hmm.
right? From building factories and workers programs. When you look at the New Deal and things like that, where and a lot of those were environmental worker programs. The firefighting divisions, the forestry departments,
Hmm.
stuff like that. I think people forget, and especially members of the right wing of the political spectrum forget that that's what it does take, that you have to wrangle in the top 1%, so that we're not all fighting for the 1% that's left,
Yeah.
right? And I
Scrap.
think youth voters are definitely looking at that, and we're looking at what other countries are doing now. When Sweden and Denmark and these Scandinavian countries can give their people not only paid maternity leave for a year, but paid paternity leave
Hmm.
for a year, right? Which you look at. I was taught that your team's only as good as the worst player, right? And everyone needs to chip in to help that worst player be a better individual,
Hmm.
right? And I know Arkansas has one of the biggest welfare families in the country, being the Waldens, and I'm wondering how you plan on reworking that so that big companies aren't the biggest users of those big spending policies, right? And how it definitely funnels down to the bottom, right?
Well,
And
number one, I think one of the biggest problems in our country is that corporation, like we have multi-billion dollar corporations that take hundreds of millions of dollars in government subsidies. And I don't think that a corporation should be allowed to take government subsidies when it is become a certain size. I mean, I can get into this whole tax idea I have where we start breaking the tax code down in different ways, where we have
right,
small businesses, medium, large, and then corporate, like giant corporations, where small businesses are taxed at a flat 10% with no tax evasion loopholes, and they could make anywhere between zero and $100,000 a year profit, and then we could have medium-sized businesses that make between $100,000 a year and $1 million a year profit taxed at a flat 15%. A company that makes more than $1 million a year, but under $100 million a year could be a large business taxed at a flat 20%. And then anything making more than $1 billion a year should be a giant corporation taxed at a flat 25%, which is 11% less than the current corporate tax rate. And if
right,
we did something like that, the main point of it is it would end tax evasion loopholes and it would enforce taxation on the giant corporations that currently avoid taxation altogether.
yeah,
Because we look at all these different companies like Nike and Delta, FedEx, Amazon, all these different companies aren't paying federal taxes. They're using tax evasion loopholes to avoid them. And if they would pay even just a small fraction of the percent of their income in taxes, then we could use that extra
yeah,
funding coming in to alleviate some of the stresses on lower income families that are having to pay. If we could just make billionaires pay even 10% in taxes, then we would be a lot better off than we are now. I remember listening to Bill Gates talk and complain, oh, I've paid the most taxes, blah, blah, blah. He's paid $10 billion in taxes. He thinks he's
right.
paid his debt to society. Well, it's worth $100 billion. He's complaining paying
Dollars.
10%. What are you and me paying? We're paying like 25, 30%, a regular working class family.
Well, that's
And
that's the argument, right? Of like, you have Jeff Bezos, who his secretary pays the same amount in taxes that he does, a
Mhm.
percentage based of her, and it's also the fact that you look at median income. You said in Arkansas was how much?
$40,000 a year.
40,000, and what's the tax rate on 40,000?
Oh man,
Right?
they're trying to
I'd
change
have to look
right
it
now.
up, but like 15% of 40,000 is a good chunk of change for a family of four.
Oh yeah.
That's I mean, but you look at uh even upwards of, I think Eisenhower had what, like a 70% top tax bracket tax rate,
Uh-huh.
and that was Eisenhower,
Yeah.
right? And it's and you look at 70% of Jeff Bezos is, I think, 213 billion dollar net worth. Like you
A
take
lot of
50,
money.
you take 60% of that, he's still left with billions of dollars,
Hundred
billions
billions
of
of
dollars,
dollars.
hundreds of billion, which
Yeah.
people do not understand what that number really means. When you think about the most expensive house in the world is 100 million,
Uh-huh.
which he owns, by the way. I mean, he
Yeah.
owns the most expensive house. He could own thousands of the most expensive car in the world, right? It's at that point you're just hoarding wealth, like, an evil dragon in a fantasy setting. Like so to me,
Mhm.
it's one of those things where, the youth is definitely discouraged in our political um mindset of
Yeah.
of we look at these things, and we feel like there's not much, we get that political nihilistic viewpoint, right? And things aren't changing fast enough. What how will I know youth vote is a big deal and it's hard to get. How do you plan on achieving youth turnout? Because I think that would be a big help for you to do. Do you have specific plans on doing that, or
I do actually have specific plans in place and ready to go. The
right?
youth vote is really important because it's a very important group of people whose lives are going to be impacted just severely by these next few elections.
Yep.
And a lot of them just don't want to vote. They're not politically motivated. They're not interested. They may be very politically ignorant and have no idea what's really going on. They're so focused on their own life and what's going on in their life, trying to make some money to get out of their parents' house,
Right.
or to, buy their own house or whatever. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on policy, because you have to find policies that get people excited to go out and vote. Number one,
Yep.
Medicare for all. Number two, we have to federally decriminalize cannabis and nationally expunge cannabis convictions.
Yep.
A lot of younger adults smoke pot, whether it's medicinal or recreational. A lot of people do, and a lot of young
Yep.
adults have had their lives negatively impacted from cannabis use, whether they got arrested for having a gram on them, or even just paraphernalia or a seed or a stem.
Yep.
In some states, these are felony charges that will
And
follow
it's
that kid around for the rest of their life.
usually targeting disproportionately African Americans and people of color, correct? Like,
100%.
you
And
know,
that
and
was the original purpose of illegalizing it.
well, of course, who that was that Nixon who pushed that? I mean, I know he pushed a big. There's luckily tapes of him talking about that this is to disproportionately attack counterculture, and I won't use the word he used, but the African American culture. um I definitely think things like making sure African Americans are thought about when cannabis industry is moved along, and not just African Americans but people at the bottom. Here in Florida, we voted for medical marijuana unanimously, and Florida is hard to do that. You have to get a ultra majority of the
Mhm.
vote. We still managed to do that, but there's a thing that they included called vertical integration. You have to, as a cannabis business, have to be able to vertically integrate the business. But what that means technically is that you have to be able to have the entire means of production at your disposal. So what that means is that the only people that can get a license
A
are the people
lot of money.
who can afford the the logistics of that, the laboratories, the uh, farms, the I mean, you had to be able to pay for each segment of that business, right? And hopefully, if you can get elected, and soon there will be federal legislation that allows for these things. And I know there's a bunch of places recently that have been looking at. I think Malta, of all places, said that you can grow your own and all that kind of stuff. And I'm definitely for those policies, but I definitely think policies like that and things like municipal internet, right? Those are all big. My friends, and I spend a lot of time online. My friends in Sweden can get terabyte speeds that the government allows them to have, and you think how many gigs WoW is now. That's you can get that in a couple of seconds anymore. But
I remember the good old days of 8-disc installations.
oh yeah, yeah, you got to take this CD of Doom out, put this CD in. I mean, floppies. I mean, I remember
Floppies, oh man,
floppies,
you'd have stacks of them rubber banded together.
stacks of them. I mean, I remember I had Doom on floppies, and it was like, like a book like this, right? I
Yeah,
still have the
especially rural broadband is really important here in Arkansas, and we've been talking
absolutely
about a lot. And we have a lot of legislators who are already talking about it and trying to figure it out, because we have to make sure we're bringing Arkansas into the 21st century. And I
right.
think with different companies like Tesla right now coming out with that, is it Starlink
Yeah,
or Sunlink? One of those two. We're going to have
yeah,
high speed satellite internet here soon, and we need to make sure that we have the federal funding possible allocated towards making
right.
sure that every single American citizen has access to something like that at a reasonable or low or no cost.
And I definitely think those kind of things should be treated like utilities. Um, and the more you can make, no one minds the small government running, power lines, as long as they keep the power lines running,
Mhm.
right? So, if you can get good fiber to the people, and it stays that way, I think people would definitely be appreciative.
Well,
You know,
capitalism has its place. The free market is good for some things, and it does build incentive, competitive advantages, and things like that. But there are some things that just should be socialized and shouldn't be capitalized at all, such
Right.
as, of course, our healthcare. Number
Yeah.
one, when it comes to people's lives, a utility is fire, police, teachers, things like that.
Right.
But I mean, I think that internet, and now with the day and age of technology that we're in, that should be in one of those categories.
Yeah. And I know you have great stances on a lot of those things, police reform and a whole gambit of progressive policies that I think people should definitely go check out at your website. Um, I think we've went through just about all our time we have today. Um,
Well, we'll have
but
to do it again sometime then, man, because we didn't make
absolutely.
it through much. And I'm always down to talk about policy. I mean, some of the
Yeah.
other things that are important, of course, campaign finance reform, climate change. I wish I could talk for hours about climate change and how
Yeah,
important it
me
is that we
too.
start to take it seriously.
Right.
Um,
Well,
I
and
mean,
some scientists say it's almost too late, that we're now going to have to, clean up the milk that we've spilt already, right? That we're going to
oh
have to
yeah,
carbon scrub and
I think we
all
hit
that
like
stuff.
418 parts per million CO2 in our atmosphere recently. I mean,
I,
it's crazy.
I grew up in a rural town here in the South, right? And it's very similar to Arkansas. In fact, I lived in Cabot for a period of time as well. So I definitely know what it's like up there. Road system though up there, don't understand. But anyway, um, the whole passing on the other side, I didn't get. But um,
And
there
real
was
quick, a little more on your question about getting younger voters involved.
yeah.
Eliminating student debt. That's going to
Oh, of
be a
course.
really big one as well.
Yeah.
Uh, because we shouldn't be penalizing Americans and people for wanting to better their education in order to better society and help raise our GDP.
Well, I'm sure you support free public education as well.
I
Um,
I do like up to 2 years at least have a 2 year associate's degrees, no cost to students, or vocational training. And I
yeah.
think we need to have a different, some kind of system implemented where if you are doing well through your associate's degree, like you have a high GPA or you're taking it seriously, you're showing up every day, then you should be
Right.
able to continue your bachelor's at no cost.
Well, and that
But you have to
includes
take it seriously.
vocational schools and all that stuff would be part of that. I think, as of me personally,
Mhm,
I look at systems like UK has had for a long time, where university is pretty much public funded for them. Granted, a few private colleges still exist, and you
mhm,
have to find funding for that, but generally it allows that 4 years of high school is essentially your first 4 years of college, right? And
mhm,
I think it better prepares the public to be higher educated and more understanding, and they're more willing to specialize right after high school, right? And they're more understanding of, hey, I'm not going to make it through this, right? Part of that,
mhm.
I know, I struggle with ADHD, which is tough for that. Mental health in this country is a big factor, and of people making through colleges and vocational and getting jobs and stuff. And I'm sure you support working on that as well.
Oh, yeah.
But again, I think it's one of those things where it's we can afford it. You know, that's my thing is, if we cut back a little on buying bullets and buy books, I think we'll do a little bit better. But it's been great having you here. Oh, but um the point I was trying to make about climate change.
Uh-huh.
I grew up here in the South, and a bunch of agriculture here in Florida. We're a big cow producer, and one of my friends was like the head of the 4-H club, and president of the class and stuff like that. And I asked him, and he's politically libertarian, right wing and stuff. And I asked him why do they why does the right wing try and discredit climate change and stuff like that? And the answer I got was surprising. The answer I got was, well, when you are a small farmer, right, you end up dealing with a lot more regulation than the big Monsanto farm down the
Mhm,
road, right? Your tractor is the thing you're having to worry about emissions on, right? It's your crops have to be, special and work right, and when Monsanto doesn't have to worry about that regulation because they have enough money to deal with it.
mhm,
um and I figured out that it's not just like, even those issues are top down issues, whether they know it or not, right? And I hope that when you run for office, you're able to bridge that left right divide and turn it into up down issues, right? Where it's not necessarily that they don't necessarily believe that it exists, because I think they do. I think they see it in their crops, they see it in a lot of these things, but and they definitely see it when storms roll through, storms
Mhm.
that freeze half of Texas and Arkansas, and hurricanes that destroy most of Florida. And I think they definitely see that, and there's plenty of them that who used to not believe in it, who are having to believe in it now. Um, but I hope you're able to highlight those top down issues when you're running and as your senator. And I just wanted to say it's great to have you here. I think we did pretty well here. I think you answered some questions that people probably really wanted to know. And we should definitely do it again. Just to reiterate, it's Dan Whitfield for America.com, right?
No, it's danforarkansas.com.
danforarkansas.com. I apologize. And
You're good.
I definitely suggest everyone going on there and finding those finding Twitter and all that stuff, and give some support where if they feel it's applicable. But I've enjoyed having you here. Um but and I will see everyone on KRTD chat next time.
Thank you so much, Sharif.